What happens when the divine masculine finally sees the truth and realizes he was the one who ran from love? Not in a dramatic movie scene, not in a poetic confession under the rain, but in the silence of his own room at 2:37 a.m. There are no witnesses to this moment, no audience, no applause, just him and the truth. For months, maybe years, he convinced himself that walking away was strength, that distance meant clarity, that detachment was maturity. He told himself the connection was too intense, too chaotic, too emotional. He labeled it toxic because it triggered him. He called it wrong timing because it demanded growth. But now something has shifted, and he can feel it. It begins subtly, a restlessness he cannot explain, a heaviness in his chest that won't go away, an ache that feels less like missing someone and more like confronting himself. He scrolls through old messages. He rereads words he once ignored, and suddenly they sound different. What once felt like pressure now feels like love. What once felt like accusation now feels like honesty. What once felt like too much now feels like the only thing that was real. And that realization, it hits like a wave, because the truth is not gentle. The truth is this: she was not chasing him. She was awakening him. She was not trying to control him. She was holding a mirror to him, and he ran not from her, but from what she reflected back. In the twin flame journey, the divine masculine often operates from conditioned identity. He believes love must be stable, logical, predictable. He believes emotions should be contained. He believes vulnerability is weakness. But this connection did something different. It bypassed logic. It exposed wounds. It activated parts of him he had buried since childhood. And instead of leaning in, he withdrew. Why? Because awakening feels like death to the ego. And the ego will do anything to survive. So he created narratives. She's too emotional. This isn't healthy. I need space. I deserve peace. But here's the question no one asks. Was it peace? Or was it avoidance? Now, months later, the silence feels louder than the arguments ever did. He thought separation would bring relief. Instead, it brought emptiness. He tried to distract himself. Work, friends, new connections, temporary excitement. But something always felt slightly off. Have you ever experienced that strange feeling where everything looks fine on the outside, but inside something is unsettled? That is where he is now. Because awakening doesn't always arrive as light. Sometimes it arrives as guilt. Not surface guilt. Not performative regret. But deep soul-level realization. He remembers the way she looked at him. Not with obsession, but with recognition. He remembers how she sensed his pain before he spoke it. How she called out his patterns. How she challenged him to be more than his comfort zone. And for the first time, instead of feeling attacked, he feels ashamed. Ashamed that he dismissed her intuition. Ashamed that he projected his fears onto her. Ashamed that he blamed her for the very wounds he refused to face. This is the moment everything shifts. Because the divine masculine is no longer defending himself. He is seeing himself. And seeing yourself clearly without distortion can be terrifying. There is no villain to point at. No external enemy. No justification left. Just the undeniable truth. She loved him in a way he wasn't ready to receive. And instead of rising to meet it, he retreated. That realization doesn't just hurt. It destabilizes his entire identity. Who is he if not the strong one? The logical one? The independent one? What if strength was actually accountability? What if logic was actually fear disguised as reason? What if independence was simply emotional avoidance? These questions begin circling his mind. He replays arguments differently now. He notices the moments she softened after conflict, the time she tried to understand him, the patience she extended, and he remembers how quickly he shut down. Why did he shut down? Because closeness triggered exposure. And exposure triggered vulnerability. And vulnerability triggered childhood wounds. Wounds of not being enough. Not being seen. Not being safe to express emotions. The divine masculine was never running from her love. He was running from the responsibility that love demanded. Love demanded presence, consistency, emotional maturity, and at the time he did not have those tools. But now he knows. And knowledge creates guilt. Because once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. This is the sacred pivot point in the twin flame dynamic. Before this moment he could rationalize. After this moment he must confront. There is a difference between missing someone and realizing you mishandled something divine. He begins to understand that what they shared was not random chemistry. It was catalytic. It was designed to evolve him. But evolution requires surrender. And surrender felt like loss of control. So he chose control. And lost the connection. The weight of that realization presses against him. Not because she is gone, but because he knows he contributed to the distance. And that awareness is heavy. Have you ever looked back at a situation and thought, if I had been more mature, more honest, more present, would things have been different? That is the space he is standing in now. The divine masculine is not heartless. He is awakening. And awakening is uncomfortable. It dismantles narratives. It strips excuses. It exposes patterns. But it also opens the heart. And here's the paradox. The same guilt that feels crushing is also proof that his heart is expanding, because a closed heart does not feel remorse. A numb soul does not reflect. A defensive ego does not take responsibility. The fact that he feels overwhelmed by guilt means something sacred is happening. The illusion is collapsing. And when illusion collapses, truth rushes in. He may not know what to do next. He may not reach out immediately. He may still be processing. But something irreversible has begun. The divine masculine has crossed the threshold from denial to awareness. And awareness changes everything. This is not yet reunion. This is not yet apology. This is not yet reconciliation. This is the quiet, private reckoning before transformation. The night where he sits alone and whispers internally, I see it now. And once he sees it, he can no longer pretend he doesn't. The guilt is not punishment. It is initiation. It is the first crack in the armor. The first sign that ego is loosening its grip. The first evidence that the divine masculine is moving from avoidance to accountability. And accountability is where true union begins. But here's the deeper question. Will he allow this guilt to evolve into growth? Or will he retreat again into distraction? That choice is coming. And in the next part of this journey, we will explore the illusion he once believed, and why he thought walking away was the only option. If you resonate with this energy, stay with me, because what feels like regret may actually be the beginning of sacred transformation. Before the guilt, there was conviction. Before the awakening, there was certainty. The divine masculine did not leave thinking he was wrong. He left believing he was protecting himself. And that is the part most people misunderstand. When he stepped back from the connection, he wasn't consciously trying to hurt her. He wasn't plotting abandonment. He wasn't sitting there calculating emotional damage. He genuinely believed he was doing the right thing. But right according to what? According to the illusion he had been living inside his entire life. You see, the divine masculine is often shaped by conditioning long before he meets his twin flame. From childhood, he is taught that strength equals control, that emotions should be managed, minimized, or hidden, that vulnerability is dangerous, that love must make sense. So when this connection arrived, intense, magnetic, destabilizing, it did not feel safe, felt overwhelming. And when something feels overwhelming, the ego labels it as a threat. He told himself, this is too intense. I'm losing myself. This relationship is consuming me. I need space to think clearly. But was he losing himself? Or was he losing control? There's a difference. The illusion he believed was that emotional distance equals clarity. In his mind, stepping back meant regaining balance. Detaching meant regaining power. Silence meant regaining independence. He equated emotional intensity with chaos. Because the connection forced him to feel. And feeling was unfamiliar territory. The divine feminine, in contrast, often processes emotion through expression. She talks, reflects, analyzes, confronts. She dives into the depth. He withdraws. Not because he doesn't care, but because depth triggers exposure. And exposure triggers fear. Have you ever noticed how some people shut down when conversations get too real? It's not always indifference. Sometimes it's survival. The divine masculine's illusion was built on survival strategies. Strategies formed long before this connection ever existed. If he grew up in an environment where emotions were dismissed, if vulnerability was met with criticism, if expressing needs resulted in rejection, then shutting down became safety. And when the twin flame dynamic activated those buried wounds, he defaulted to what he knew: distance. He may have told himself that she was too emotional, but what if she was simply emotionally aware? He may have told himself the relationship was unstable, but what if it was simply honest? He may have convinced himself that real love shouldn't feel this hard, but what if real love feels hard when you're healing? These are the cracks in the illusion. At the time, though, he couldn't see them, because ego has a powerful way of protecting identity. He identified as the rational one, the grounded one, the practical one. So when she expressed intuition, synchronicities, spiritual connection, emotional depth, he categorized it as irrational. He told himself, she's projecting, she's overthinking, she's too attached. But deep down he felt the bond, and that scared him more than anything, because it bypassed logic. It didn't ask for permission, it didn't follow timelines, it didn't fit into neat categories, simply existed. And its intensity mirrored parts of him he had never explored. There is a subtle but powerful moment in many twin flame journeys where the divine masculine begins to feel like he is being seen too clearly. She sees his potential. She sees his wounds. She sees his patterns. And instead of feeling understood, he feels exposed. Exposure is uncomfortable when you're not ready to grow. So he reframed it. He labeled her awareness as criticism. He labeled her honesty as pressure. He labeled her depth as drama. This is how illusion protects itself. By twisting perception. Let's go deeper. The illusion wasn't just about her. It was about him. He believed he had to be perfect to be worthy of love. He believed he had to have his life fully together before committing. He believed that if he showed weakness, she would lose respect. So instead of revealing insecurities, he masked them with distance. Instead of admitting fear, he called it incompatibility. Instead of saying, "I'm not ready," he said, "This isn't right." And for a while it worked. He regained emotional control. Conversations stopped triggering him. Silence felt calm. Life became predictable again. But predictability is not the same as fulfillment. He didn't realize that what he called peace was actually numbness. And numbness is seductive. Feels stable. Feels safe. Feels quiet. But it lacks aliveness. The connection had made him feel alive in ways he wasn't prepared for. Alive enough to confront childhood wounds. Alive enough to question identity. Alive enough to challenge his patterns. And that level of aliveness felt destabilizing. So he chose the familiar over the transformative. He chose safety over expansion. And in that moment the illusion felt justified. Because ego rewards immediate comfort. Growth rarely does. Have you ever made a decision that felt easier in the short term, only to realize later it cost you something meaningful? That is the illusion at work. The divine masculine believed walking away would bring clarity, but clarity built on avoidance is fragile. He believed detachment meant maturity, but maturity requires integration, not suppression. He believed independence meant not needing anyone, but healthy interdependence is not weakness. The illusion also told him that time would fade the connection, that distance would dilute intensity, that if he just focused on other things the bond would weaken. But twin flame energy does not dissolve through distraction. It lingers. It waits. It resurfaces when least expected. And slowly, cracks begin forming in the illusion. Maybe he sees her thriving without him. Maybe he feels her emotional withdrawal energetically. Maybe life starts reflecting emptiness in unexpected ways. The illusion begins to wobble. Because illusions require maintenance. They require constant justification, constant storytelling, constant mental defense. And defending something unconsciously is exhausting. That's when subtle awareness begins creeping in. Moments where he questions his narrative. Moments where he remembers her words differently. Moments where he wonders if he misinterpreted her intentions. This is where the illusion starts dissolving. But before guilt arrives, there is confusion. Because if the story he told himself was wrong, then who was he in the story? Was he the strong one, or the avoidant one? Was he the logical one, or the emotionally guarded one? Was he protecting himself, or protecting his ego? These questions don't come all at once. They arrive gradually, in quiet reflection, in unexpected triggers, in dreams, in silence. The illusion he once believed was not malicious. It was defensive. It was built from unhealed parts trying to survive. And survival strategies often masquerade as wisdom. But survival is not the same as growth. The divine masculine thought walking away was strength. He thought holding emotional distance was self-control. He thought avoiding depth was clarity. But strength is not running. Self-control is not suppression. Clarity is not avoidance. The illusion begins to crumble when he realizes something simple yet devastating. She wasn't trying to control him. She was inviting him to evolve. And evolution requires discomfort. The moment he understands that, everything starts to reframe. Arguments become mirrors. Triggers become teachers. Distance becomes regret. But we are not there yet. Right now, he is standing at the edge of realization. The illusion is cracking. But the full truth hasn't landed. In the next part of this journey, we will explore the exact moment that shatters the illusion completely. The trigger that forces him to confront what he lost. Because every awakening has a catalyst. And when that catalyst hits, the guilt begins. Stay with me. Illusions rarely collapse all at once. They crack. They tremble. They flicker at the edges of awareness. And then there is a moment so quiet, yet so undeniable, that the divine masculine cannot go back to who he was before it. This is the awakening trigger. It doesn't always look dramatic from the outside. There is no lightning strike, no cosmic announcement, no grand speech of realization. Instead, it often begins with something small, a notification, a memory, a silence that feels heavier than usual. Maybe he hears a song they once shared. First, it's just background noise, but then the lyrics hit differently. Words about regret, about timing, about love lost through fear. He freezes, because suddenly it's not just a song, it's a mirror. Or maybe he sees her name unexpectedly, on social media, in a conversation, in a place he didn't expect it. And instead of indifference, there's a sharp pull in his chest. Not longing, not ego, recognition. That recognition is subtle but powerful. Because for the first time, he isn't trying to prove he's fine. He's trying to understand why he isn't. The awakening trigger can also come through contrast. Perhaps he enters a new relationship. On paper, everything seems easier, less intense, less triggering, more normal. But something is missing. There's no depth that shakes him. No conversations that pierce through his defenses. No mirror that challenges him to evolve. And that absence becomes louder than the previous chaos. He begins to realize that intensity was not dysfunction. It was transformation. Or perhaps life itself begins destabilizing. Career stress, unexpected setbacks, health scares, loneliness creeping in during quiet evenings. And in those moments of vulnerability, he remembers her. Not as drama, not as conflict, but as support. He remembers how she sensed when he was struggling, even when he didn't admit it. He remembers how she pushed him toward growth he resisted. He remembers how she saw something in him he didn't yet believe about himself. And the thought surfaces, what if she wasn't the problem? That question is the crack in the wall. Because up until this moment, he believed the narrative he constructed. She was too emotional. The timing was wrong. He needed space. But now that narrative feels thin, fragile. He starts replaying conversations differently, remembering the time she expressed hurt, not as accusation but as honesty. Remembering the time she asked for clarity, not as pressure but as vulnerability. Remembering the time she cried, not as manipulation but as openness. And something shifts internally. He realizes she wasn't demanding perfection. She was asking for presence. That realization is not gentle. It lands like a weight, because presence requires courage. And he did not show up fully. Sometimes the awakening trigger comes through dreams. He dreams of her unexpectedly. Not romantic dreams. Not fantasy, but conversations unfinished. Moments where she looks at him, not angry, not sad, but steady, as if she knows something he's only now beginning to understand. He wakes up unsettled. Why now? Why after so much distance? Why when he thought he had moved on? Because awakening doesn't operate on ego timelines. It operates on soul readiness. There is also a specific moment that many divine masculines experience, though they rarely admit it. He sees her evolving. Maybe she stops reaching out. Maybe her energy shifts from longing to detachment. Maybe she looks peaceful without him. And instead of relief, he feels something deeper. Loss. Not because she belongs to him, but because he realizes he may have lost access to a version of himself he only touched through her. Have you ever realized that someone didn't just love you? They awakened you? That's the moment. He understands that the connection wasn't about possession. It was about activation, and he stepped away from it. That awareness becomes the awakening trigger. Sometimes the trigger is more concrete. An argument in a new relationship that exposes his same avoidance patterns. A friend calling him out on emotional unavailability. A moment of loneliness so deep it strips away distraction. In that stillness, without noise to buffer the truth, he finally admits something to himself. He ran. Not because she was wrong, but because he was afraid. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid of being exposed. Afraid of loving that deeply. The illusion he built begins collapsing rapidly now. Because once fear is identified, the story changes. It was never about her being too much. It was about him feeling inadequate. It was never about wrong timing. It was about emotional immaturity. It was never about incompatibility. It was about unhealed wounds. And that recognition is overwhelming, because it shifts responsibility inward. There is no external enemy to blame. No circumstance to hide behind, just self-awareness. And self-awareness can be brutal. This is when guilt begins stirring, but it hasn't fully surfaced yet. First comes clarity. He sees that she loved him authentically. He sees that she tried to communicate. He sees that she extended patience. He sees that she stayed longer than most would have. And he sees the moments he shut down, the moments he avoided difficult conversations, the times he dismissed her concerns, the emotional walls he justified. It's not about replaying every mistake. It's about recognizing the pattern, avoidance. And that recognition is the awakening trigger, because he can no longer claim ignorance. He knows now. The connection was not random chemistry. It was catalytic. It forced growth, and he chose comfort instead. Have you ever realized that what you once labeled as chaos was actually growth trying to happen? That is where he stands. He begins to understand that intensity is not toxicity. It is depth, and depth requires integration. The awakening trigger also activates something energetic. The twin flame bond is not solely emotional. It is vibrational. When one shifts energetically, the other feels it. If the divine feminine has detached, healed, or surrendered, that shift ripples. He feels the absence of her energetic pull, and paradoxically, that absence wakes him up. Because when she stops chasing, he must face himself. When she stops trying to explain, he must interpret silence. When she stops holding space for his growth, he must choose it alone. And alone is uncomfortable, but alone is where awakening happens. This is the moment he whispers internally, "I misunderstood." He misunderstood her intensity. He misunderstood her vulnerability. He misunderstood the purpose of the connection. And now the illusion has nowhere left to hide. Awakening is not romantic. It is humbling. It requires admitting, "I was wrong." And for the divine masculine, whose identity often revolves around control and certainty, that admission shakes the foundation. But here's the sacred part. This shaking is necessary, because what collapses is ego structure, not soul truth. The awakening trigger is not punishment. It is invitation. An invitation to step into accountability. An invitation to integrate emotion and logic. An invitation to become the version of himself she saw all along. And once that invitation is accepted internally, even quietly, guilt begins rising. Not self-hatred, not shame spiraling, but deep awareness of impact. He understands now that his silence hurt. that his withdrawal confused, that his emotional unavailability created distance. And the weight of that understanding settles in his chest. This is the turning point. Before this moment he believed the story. After this moment he questions it. Before this moment he defended himself. After this moment he reflects. The awakening trigger has done its work. The illusion has shattered. And now he stands in truth. But truth is only the beginning. Because once the truth settles, the weight of regret begins. Awakening is sharp, but regret is heavy. Once the illusion shatters and the truth settles in, the divine masculine does not immediately feel clarity or empowerment. He feels weight, a quiet, pressing weight in his chest that doesn't disappear when he distracts himself. It doesn't dissolve when he works longer hours. It doesn't fade when he scrolls through social media or fills his schedule, because this is not surface emotion. This is soul-level regret. There is a difference between missing someone and realizing you mishandled something sacred. Missing someone is emotional. Regret is existential. It shakes identity. At first he tries to intellectualize it. Everyone makes mistakes. It just wasn't meant to be. We both had issues. But those thoughts feel hollow now, because deep down he knows this wasn't just a casual relationship. It was transformative. And he did not rise to meet it. The memories return, not in a romanticized blur, but in sharp detail. He remembers the night she tried to explain how his emotional distance hurt her. He remembers the way her voice trembled, not from anger but from vulnerability. He remembers how he shut down mid-conversation, withdrew, or changed the subject. At the time, he told himself she was overreacting. Now he sees something else. She was asking to be met, and he didn't meet her. That realization is not easy, because regret doesn't just replay the good moments. It highlights the missed opportunities, the moments where he could have chosen differently, the times he could have said, "I'm scared," instead of "I need space," the times he could have stayed present instead of emotionally checking out, the times he could have listened instead of defending. And the hardest part? He sees that she wasn't attacking him. She was inviting him to grow. The weight of regret grows heavier when he recognizes that she saw potential in him he had not yet embraced. She believed in his depth. She believed in his capacity to love more fully. She believed he could evolve. And instead of stepping into that belief, he retreated. Why? Because belief from someone else can feel like pressure when you don't believe in yourself. Now, in hindsight, he understands that her intensity wasn't control. It was commitment. Her honesty wasn't criticism, it was care. Her emotional expression wasn't weakness, it was courage. And here's where the guilt deepens. He realizes she was brave enough to stay vulnerable, and he wasn't brave enough to stay present. This is where regret transforms from memory into emotion. It moves from the mind into the body. He feels it in quiet moments, driving alone, lying in bed at night, sitting in silence when there's no noise to escape into. Have you ever had a realization hit you so deeply that it changes the way you see yourself? That's where he is now. The divine masculine begins questioning not just the relationship, but his own patterns. Why do I shut down when things get serious? Why do I pull away when someone gets close? Why did I label depth as danger? These questions don't come from ego anymore. They come from humility. And humility is uncomfortable, because humility requires admitting, I could have done better. There's a moment, often private and unseen, where he stops blaming circumstances entirely. He stops saying it just wasn't aligned. He stops saying we were too different. He stops saying it was too intense. And instead, he whispers internally, I wasn't ready. And that whisper carries weight, because it means he sees that readiness was his responsibility, not hers. This is where guilt intensifies. Not the dramatic kind that seeks pity, but the quiet kind that demands reflection. He replays the last conversation, the final message, the tone of her goodbye. Did she sound exhausted? Did she sound disappointed? Did she sound resigned? He begins to notice details he ignored before. The way she stopped arguing, the way she became calm, the way her energy shifted from trying to explain to simply accepting. That shift now haunts him, because acceptance often means surrender, and surrender often means letting go. He realizes she may have reached a breaking point long before he understood what was happening, and the weight of that understanding presses down. Regret is heavy because it carries awareness, and awareness cannot be undone. He cannot go back to not knowing. He cannot unsee the truth. And the truth is this: she did not leave because she didn't love him. She left because she could no longer carry the connection alone. That realization pierces deeper than any argument ever did, because it reveals imbalance. And imbalance implies responsibility. There is also another layer to this regret, one that is harder to articulate. He regrets not just losing her. He regrets losing who he was becoming with her. The version of himself that felt more open, more emotionally aware, more alive. She activated parts of him that no one else had touched. And instead of nurturing that growth, he abandoned it. Have you ever walked away from something that challenged you, only to later realize it was exactly what you needed? That's the gravity of this moment. The divine masculine begins to feel ashamed, not because he is a bad person, but because he recognizes immaturity. And immaturity is painful to confront when you pride yourself on being strong. But here's the sacred distinction. Shame says, I am flawed. Guilt says, I acted from fear. And guilt can be transformed. Shame paralyzes. Guilt can awaken. Right now, he is sitting between those two states. He feels responsible but not yet fully integrated. He feels remorse but not yet fully empowered. He may even want to reach out. But fear rises again. What if she doesn't respond? What if she's moved on? What if she no longer sees him the same way? Regret often arrives too late for comfort, and that timing makes it sharper. But here's the paradox of the twin flame journey. Nothing is wasted. Even regret has purpose, because regret cracks ego open. It softens pride. It dismantles defensiveness. And for the divine masculine, who once relied heavily on control and certainty, this softening is revolutionary. The weight he feels is not meant to destroy him. It is meant to transform him. He is no longer the version of himself who walked away confidently. He is now the version who sees the cost of that decision. And that awareness is sacred, because only when someone feels the full weight of their choices can they choose differently next time. The question now is not whether he feels regret. He does. The question is what he will do with it. Will he numb it again? Will he justify it? Or will he allow it to guide him toward growth? Because regret, when embraced consciously, becomes accountability. And accountability becomes evolution. The divine masculine is standing at a crossroads. On one side, retreat into comfort. On the other, step into responsibility. The weight of regret is heavy, but it is also the doorway to becoming. Regret is heavy, but when regret is not numbed, it deepens. And when it deepens, it begins dismantling identity. This is where the divine masculine enters his dark night. Not the dramatic kind that is visible to the world. Not the kind that announces itself publicly, but the internal unraveling that happens quietly, behind closed doors. The stage where guilt no longer feels like a passing emotion, feels like confrontation. Up until now, he has been reflecting on what happened between them. Now the focus shifts inward. Because once he admits, I wasn't ready, a new question emerges. Why wasn't I ready? That question is not comfortable. It leads somewhere deeper. Somewhere older. Somewhere he has avoided for years. The divine masculine's dark night often begins when he realizes the pattern did not start with her. She was not the cause. She was the trigger. And triggers expose wounds that predate the relationship. He begins to notice similarities. Other relationships where he withdrew when intimacy deepened. Other moments where he chose logic over emotion. Other times where he shut down instead of expressing fear. And suddenly, the twin flame connection becomes a pattern breaker, not an isolated event. Have you ever realized that a relationship wasn't random, but catalytic? That it exposed a pattern you didn't want to see? That is where he stands now. The guilt he felt about hurting her begins expanding into awareness of hurting himself. Because avoidance doesn't just distance you from others. It distances you from your own emotional truth. He may experience emotional waves he doesn't know how to handle. Restlessness. Anxiety without clear cause. Sudden sadness that feels disproportionate to the moment. He might think, Why is this hitting me now? Because awakening delayed is still awakening. And the dark night is not punishment. It is integration demanding attention. The divine masculine may try to distract himself again, work harder, socialize more, enter new situations, but the distraction feels hollow. Because once consciousness expands, old coping mechanisms lose their power. He can't unknow what he knows. He can't unsee his pattern. And now that he sees it, he must face it. This is the stage where childhood memories sometimes resurface unexpectedly. Moments where he felt unheard. Moments where expressing emotion led to criticism. Moments where vulnerability was met with withdrawal. He begins to connect dots. I learned to shut down early. I learned that being strong meant being silent. I learned that needing someone made me weak. And suddenly the twin flame dynamic makes sense in a new way. She wasn't overwhelming. She was awakening. Her emotional depth didn't create fear. It exposed fear that was already there. And that realization destabilizes him, because it shifts responsibility from circumstance to conditioning. It is easier to say, we were incompatible. It is harder to say, I was emotionally guarded because I never learned safety. The dark night of the divine masculine is not about romantic longing. It is about identity dismantling. Who is he without emotional walls? Who is he without control? Who is he if he allows himself to feel fully? That uncertainty creates internal chaos. He may question his past decisions beyond the relationship, career choices, friendships, life direction. Because once one illusion falls, others become visible. The dark night strips false structures. And stripping false structures feels like loss. There may be nights where sleep is restless. Moments where he stares at the ceiling replaying conversations. Not to blame her. Not to defend himself. But to understand. Understanding replaces ego now. And understanding is painful before it is liberating. He might begin journaling. Or thinking more deeply than usual. Or sitting in silence longer than he ever has before. And in that silence, uncomfortable truths surface. I was afraid of being seen. I didn't trust love because I didn't trust myself. I thought distance would protect me. The dark night brings humility, but it also brings vulnerability. And vulnerability for the divine masculine feels unfamiliar. Have you ever felt your emotional defenses collapsing and not known who you were without them? That is the experience. He may feel exposed internally even if no one else sees it. The guilt from earlier now becomes something else. Responsibility. Not performative responsibility. Not reaching out immediately to fix things. But internal accountability. He sees the cause and effect. He sees how his silence created confusion. How his withdrawal created insecurity. How his avoidance intensified the dynamic. And he can no longer hide behind narratives. This is the death of ego identity. And ego death is terrifying. Because ego provides structure, predictability, certainty. But that structure was built on avoidance. So its collapse, though painful, is necessary. In spiritual terms, this is the initiation phase. The divine masculine confronts his shadow. Shadow does not mean evil. Shadow means unintegrated parts. Fear of rejection. Fear of inadequacy. Fear of losing autonomy. Fear of failing at love. He begins seeing that the twin flame connection was designed to activate those shadows. Not to punish him, but to evolve him. The dark night is where resistance ends. He may not fully surrender yet, but he feels the exhaustion of fighting growth, fighting emotion, fighting accountability. There is also grief in this phase. Not just grief for losing her, but grief for the version of himself who chose fear. Grief for missed opportunities. Grief for the time spent avoiding rather than expanding. Grief for the realization that growth delayed costs something. And grief softens him. The divine masculine who once prided himself on emotional control now feels waves he cannot neatly categorize. And here is the sacred turning point. Instead of suppressing them, he begins allowing them. Even if quietly, even if imperfectly, even if he doesn't tell anyone. That allowance is transformation. Because the dark night is not about suffering endlessly. It is about breaking through resistance. It is about dismantling the false belief that strength equals emotional suppression. True strength, he begins realizing, is emotional presence. True independence is not avoidance. It is self-awareness. True control is not shutting down. It is choosing conscious response. The divine masculine is not broken in this phase. He is becoming. But becoming feels chaotic before it feels grounded. He may feel lost. He may question whether he deserves another chance. He may wonder if she would even recognize him now. And those doubts are part of the purification process. Because ego once believed he was justified. Now humility teaches him he has room to grow. The dark night does not guarantee reunion. It guarantees evolution. And evolution is the real purpose of the twin flame journey. In this stage, he begins understanding that guilt was not punishment. It was the doorway. Regret was not weakness. It was awakening. And the dark night is not collapse. It is reconstruction. He is slowly integrating emotion and logic, heart and mind, strength and softness. This is the beginning of balance. And balance is what the divine masculine truly lacked before. But there is one final shift that must happen before transformation stabilizes. He must see guilt not as something to drown in, but as something sacred. At first, guilt feels unbearable. It presses on the chest. It replays memories at inconvenient hours. It whispers, "You should have done better." The divine masculine may initially experience guilt as self-condemnation, a heavy awareness that he mishandled something precious, that he walked away from growth, that he hurt someone who loved him sincerely. But here is the deeper truth. Guilt is not the enemy. Guilt is evidence. Evidence that his heart is no longer closed. There is something profoundly sacred about feeling remorse. Because indifference feels nothing. A closed heart deflects responsibility. A defensive ego rationalizes everything. A disconnected soul rewrites history to avoid discomfort. But the divine masculine is no longer doing that. He feels it fully. And that feeling, though painful, is a sign of spiritual maturity beginning to take root. Let's pause here and ask something important. What if guilt is not punishment, but awakening? In spiritual growth, there is a difference between toxic shame and conscious guilt. Shame says, "I am flawed." Guilt says, "I acted from fear." Shame attacks identity. Guilt illuminates behavior. Shame paralyzes. Guilt teaches. And in the twin flame journey, guilt often marks the exact moment the ego loosens its grip. Before awakening, he justified. After awakening, he reflects. Before, he defended. Now he understands. That shift is sacred, because understanding requires humility. And humility is the foundation of divine love. The divine masculine once believed strength meant control. Control of emotions. Control of narrative. Control of outcome. But control is rooted in fear. True strength is accountability. And accountability requires the willingness to say internally, "I see what I did." Not to punish himself. Not to collapse into despair. But to recognize impact. This is where guilt transforms. It moves from self-criticism into conscience. Conscience is sacred. It is the soul's internal compass realigning. He begins to notice something subtle but powerful. The guilt doesn't just revolve around losing her. It revolves around betraying his own potential. He regrets not just walking away. He regrets shrinking. He regrets choosing safety over expansion. He regrets abandoning growth. Have you ever looked back at a moment and realized you chose comfort over courage? That realization is not weakness. It is evolution. Because only a maturing soul can see its own missteps clearly. The divine masculine begins recognizing that the connection wasn't meant to flatter his ego. It was meant to refine him. And refinement requires friction. The guilt he feels now is the friction that polishes character. It softens arrogance. Dissolves pride. It replaces defensiveness with introspection. And here is the paradox. The same emotion that feels heavy is also opening his heart. Because guilt requires empathy. He must imagine her perspective. He must feel the impact of his silence. He must acknowledge how his avoidance may have confused or hurt her. Empathy was not fully active before. It is awakening now. That awakening is holy. In psychological terms, guilt signals the integration of suppressed emotional layers. In spiritual terms, it signals the activation of conscience. In energetic terms, it signals heart chakra expansion. The divine masculine is no longer operating solely from logic. He is integrating heart. And integration is sacred union within. This is why guilt cannot be dismissed casually in the twin flame dynamic. It is not drama. It is not manipulation. It is a turning point, because once conscience awakens, regression becomes difficult. He may try to suppress the guilt at times. He may feel overwhelmed by it. He may even question whether he deserves forgiveness. But even those questions indicate growth. A disconnected man does not question his impact. An awakened one does. There is also something deeper happening beneath the surface. The divine masculine is integrating his inner feminine. Psychologically, this is the anima, the emotional, intuitive aspect of the psyche. For much of his life, he may have suppressed that side. Valued rationality over intuition, action over feeling, strength over sensitivity. But guilt awakens feeling, and feeling integrates wholeness. He is learning that emotional awareness does not diminish masculinity, deepens it. That realization alone can reshape identity, because masculinity conditioned by society often excludes vulnerability, but divine masculinity includes it. Divine masculinity protects through presence, not avoidance, leads through accountability, not control, loves through depth, not distance. Guilt becomes sacred when it shifts from self-attack to self-awareness. Instead of saying, "I am terrible," he begins saying, "I need to grow." Instead of saying, "I ruined everything," he begins saying, "I understand now." Understanding is powerful. It transforms pain into purpose. The guilt is not meant to drown him. It is meant to guide him. Think about this. If he felt nothing, would growth be possible? If he justified everything, would change occur? If he dismissed her experience entirely, would evolution happen? No. It is the discomfort that pushes transformation. It is the heaviness that demands integration. It is the remorse that compels responsibility. Guilt, when conscious, becomes sacred fire. Fire purifies. It burns away illusion. It burns away pride. It burns away the false identity that said he was always right. But fire also refines. It leaves behind something stronger, something clearer, something humbler. This is why many divine masculines reach a point where they no longer want to escape guilt. They want to resolve it. Resolution does not mean immediate reunion. It means internal alignment. He begins asking himself, how do I become someone who doesn't repeat this pattern? How do I show up differently in love? How do I integrate what I've learned? These questions are sacred. They indicate readiness. Readiness not for her necessarily, but for growth. And growth is the real goal. The twin flame journey is not about romantic completion. It is about spiritual evolution. Guilt is one of the sharpest teachers on that path. Teaches responsibility. It teaches empathy. Teaches humility. And humility is what allows divine love to flourish. Without humility, love becomes control. Without accountability, connection becomes imbalance. Without conscience, relationships repeat cycles. The divine masculine is stepping out of cycle. That is sacred. But there is still one more challenge he must face. Feeling guilt is one thing. Acting from growth is another. Because even after awakening and humility, fear lingers. The fear of facing her again. The fear of rejection. The fear that he has waited too long. Once guilt has softened him, once humility has cracked the armor, once he has admitted to himself, "I see it now," a new battle begins. It is quieter than the ego battles before, less defensive, but more vulnerable, because now the divine masculine wants something he once resisted. Connection, not from loneliness, not from ego validation, but from awareness. He wants to reach out, and that desire alone terrifies him. Because desire requires risk, and risk requires exposure. Up until this point, the transformation has been internal, private, invisible to her. But now he faces a new threshold. Do I stay in reflection, or do I act from growth? This is where fear resurfaces. Not the old fear of emotional intensity, not the fear of being consumed, but a new fear. The fear of rejection, the fear that she has moved on. The fear that he no longer has access to the connection he once took for granted. And this fear feels sharper than before. Because before he believed he had control. Now he knows he doesn't. There is a subtle but powerful shift here. When he walked away, he assumed time would preserve possibility. He assumed the door would remain open. He assumed that if he ever wanted to return, he could. But awareness changes that assumption. Because now he understands something uncomfortable. She may have healed without him. She may have surrendered. She may have chosen herself. And that possibility destabilizes him. Have you ever realized that someone you once thought would always be there might not be anymore? That realization humbles the ego instantly. The divine masculine now experiences a conflict between heart and fear. His heart says, reach out. Tell her the truth. Own your growth. But fear says, what if she doesn't respond? What if she's happy without you? What if you reopen wounds? What if she sees you the same way you used to be? That last fear is the deepest, because he has changed internally, but she hasn't witnessed it. And growth unseen feels fragile. He may draft messages late at night, type paragraphs, delete them, rewrite them, overanalyze tone, overthink timing, stare at the screen, then close it. This hesitation is not immaturity, it is vulnerability. For the first time, he is not reaching out from ego impulse. He is contemplating reaching out from humility, and humility fears disrespecting boundaries. There is also shame woven into this moment. He knows he hurt her. He knows he withdrew. He knows he left her confused or exhausted. So part of him believes, I don't deserve another chance. That belief creates paralysis. Because when guilt is not fully integrated, it can turn into self-sabotage. Instead of saying, I've grown, he says, I failed. Instead of saying, I can show up differently, he says, I ruined it. But here's the truth he must confront. Growth is meaningless if it stays internal. Transformation matures through action. The fear of facing her again is not just fear of rejection. It is fear of accountability in real time. If he reaches out, he cannot hide behind reflection. He must speak. He must listen. He must face her response. And her response is uncertain. Uncertainty destabilizes the ego, but it strengthens the soul. There is also something deeper happening energetically. In many twin flame journeys, when the divine feminine detaches and focuses inward, her energy shifts. She stops chasing. She stops explaining. She stops overextending. And that energetic withdrawal creates space. Space where he must decide whether to rise. That space feels uncomfortable. Because he is no longer reacting to her intensity. He is responding to her absence. Absence can be louder than presence. And in that silence, he feels longing differently. Not longing for validation, but longing for alignment. He misses not just her. He misses the depth. The conversations that forced introspection. The emotional mirror that challenged him. The way she saw through him. And now, instead of feeling threatened by that mirror, he desires it. But desire does not erase fear. Fear whispers, what if she has outgrown you? This is perhaps the most humbling fear of all, because growth does not guarantee reunion, and that uncertainty demands surrender. The divine masculine must face a critical internal question. Am I reaching out because I am lonely, or because I am ready? That distinction determines everything. Loneliness seeks comfort. Readiness seeks accountability. If he reaches out from loneliness, old patterns will repeat. If he reaches out from readiness, transformation stabilizes. But readiness requires courage. Courage to admit mistakes openly. Courage to accept her boundaries. Courage to face the possibility that she may not reciprocate. This is where divine masculinity truly forms. Not in dominance. Not in control. But in grounded vulnerability. He must be willing to say, I understand what happened. I take responsibility. I have changed. Without expectation. Without entitlement. Without demanding outcome. That is terrifying. Because ego always wants guarantee. But divine love operates through surrender. Have you ever stood on the edge of sending a message that could change everything? That trembling moment? That is where he stands now. And this trembling is sacred. It means he values the connection enough to risk discomfort. It means pride no longer dominates. It means humility has matured into intention, but fear still lingers. Fear that he waited too long. Fear that she interpreted his silence as indifference. Fear that she built walls after he built his. There is irony here. He once feared vulnerability. Now he fears the consequences of withholding it. That shift is profound, because it reveals evolution. The divine masculine is no longer running from depth. He is running toward it. But he must slow down. Acting impulsively to relieve guilt will not create stability. He must ground himself first. Integrate growth fully. Ensure that reaching out is not an attempt to escape discomfort. Sometimes the bravest thing he can do is continue healing before acting. And sometimes the bravest thing is to step forward despite fear. The tension between those two choices defines this stage. This is where many divine masculines hover. Awake, remorseful, humbled, but uncertain. The fear of facing her again is not weakness. It is reverence. Reverence for the connection. Reverence for the impact. Reverence for the possibility that she deserves the highest version of him. And he is still becoming that version. But here is the empowering truth. Fear does not mean he should retreat. It means he is standing at growth's edge. Growth always feels uncertain before it stabilizes. Awareness changes you. Guilt humbles you. Fear softens you. But transformation requires action. Up until now, the divine masculine has been moving internally, reflecting, breaking down illusions, facing regret, sitting in the discomfort of his own avoidance, wrestling with fear about reaching out. But there comes a point where introspection is no longer enough. He realizes something powerful. If I truly see my patterns, then I must change them. Because awareness without action becomes self-torture. This is the turning point. This is where the divine masculine shifts from processing to rebuilding. And rebuilding is not glamorous. It's not dramatic. It's slow. It's deliberate. It's uncomfortable. The first step in his transformation path is responsibility. Not surface-level responsibility. Not sending a message that says, "Sorry if I hurt you," but deep ownership. Ownership of emotional shutdown. Ownership of avoidance. Ownership of projection. He begins recognizing that growth is not about explaining himself. It's about correcting himself. There's a difference. Explaining seeks validation. Correcting seeks evolution. He may begin therapy, or journaling consistently, or reading about attachment styles, or sitting in silence and asking hard questions. Why do I pull away when things get serious? Why does vulnerability feel unsafe? Why do I equate independence with distance? The divine masculine is no longer blaming circumstances. He is investigating his own emotional architecture. And this is sacred work. Because the twin flame journey is not about chasing union externally. It is about building union internally. Before, he thought strength meant control. Now, he learns that strength means regulation. Emotional regulation. Instead of shutting down when overwhelmed, he practices staying present. Instead of deflecting conflict, he learns to listen. Instead of labeling intensity as chaos, he learns to hold it. This is where divine masculinity is forged. Not in dominance, not in silence, but in grounded presence. Have you ever noticed how powerful someone feels when they are calm but emotionally available? That is the energy he is cultivating now. The transformation path also requires healing childhood wounds. Because patterns are rarely random, he may revisit memories where he learned that expressing emotion led to rejection, where vulnerability was mocked, where independence was rewarded more than connection. He realizes that he didn't just avoid her depth, he avoided his own. And healing requires integration. Integration of fear. Integration of insecurity. Integration of the inner child who learned to survive through emotional distance. This is shadow work. Not dramatic. Not mystical. But practical. Facing parts of himself he once suppressed. There is also a subtle but crucial shift happening in this stage. He stops focusing solely on whether reunion will happen. Instead he asks, who do I want to be regardless of outcome? That question changes everything. Because transformation that depends on reunion is unstable. Transformation rooted in identity is permanent. He understands now that even if she never returns, he must not repeat old cycles. Growth is not transactional. It is internal. This is where many divine masculines evolve from reactive to intentional. Before, he reacted to triggers. Now he anticipates them. He notices when he feels overwhelmed and doesn't withdraw automatically. He recognizes when fear surfaces and chooses communication instead of silence. He practices vulnerability in small, consistent ways. Maybe he opens up to a trusted friend. Maybe he expresses emotion without apologizing for it. Maybe he says, "I don't know how to handle this, but I want to learn." Those statements are revolutionary for someone who once equated uncertainty with weakness. The transformation path also involves rebuilding integrity. Integrity means alignment between words and actions. If he reaches out, he must be consistent. If he apologizes, he must embody change. If he expresses intention, he must follow through. Integrity rebuilds trust, whether with her or within himself. Have you ever seen someone apologize beautifully but repeat the same behavior? That is unintegrated guilt. The divine masculine must move beyond apology into embodiment. Embodiment means the nervous system shifts. Old triggers lose intensity. Fear no longer dictates behavior. He becomes steady, grounded, less reactive, more present. This steadiness is attractive energetically because it balances polarity. In the twin flame dynamic, polarity matters. Before, he was avoidant. She was expressive. He was distant. She was pursuing. But when he stabilizes internally, the dynamic shifts. He no longer needs to run. He no longer fears emotional depth. He can meet intensity with calm. That is balance. However, transformation also requires patience. He may want immediate redemption, immediate clarity, immediate reunion, but growth is not rushed. He must allow himself time to integrate, because rushing to reconnect before stability forms risks repeating the cycle. This is where maturity is tested. Can he grow quietly without demanding reward? Can he evolve without announcing it? Can he change without expecting validation? If the answer is yes, transformation is real. There is another important realization in this stage. He understands that reunion is not guaranteed, and that understanding deepens humility. Love is not owed. Opportunity is not infinite. He cannot assume access. He must accept that growth is its own reward. That acceptance removes desperation, and desperation was part of the old dynamic. The new divine masculine does not chase from fear. He approaches from clarity. If he reaches out, it will not be to reclaim control. It will be to offer presence. And presence feels different. No manipulation. No guilt projection. No defensiveness. Just grounded sincerity. He may say, "I've been reflecting. I understand my patterns. I'm not the same version of myself." And he will mean it, because he has done the work. But even if he chooses not to reach out immediately, transformation continues. He applies growth in everyday life, in friendships, in family interactions, in career decisions. He becomes less rigid, more open, more emotionally literate. This is divine masculinity embodied. And here's the sacred truth. Transformation is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming conscious. Conscious of patterns, conscious of impact, conscious of choice. The divine masculine now understands something he didn't before. Love is not meant to be avoided when it feels overwhelming. It is meant to be met with courage. Courage does not mean absence of fear. It means acting aligned despite fear. And alignment is what he is building. The old version of him reacted from ego. The new version responds from awareness. The old version withdrew. The new version leans in. The old version feared vulnerability. The new version understands that vulnerability is strength. This is the transformation path. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. And steady wins in divine union. Now that we've explored the divine masculine's awakening, his guilt, his dark night, his transformation path, we need to pause. Because there is someone watching this journey from the other side. The divine feminine. And this part is important. Because when the divine masculine awakens and begins to feel overwhelmed by guilt, there is a subtle energetic shift. He softens. He reflects. He grows. But here's the truth you must understand. His guilt is not your responsibility. Let's say that again. His awakening is not something you manage. His remorse is not something you fix. His transformation is not something you supervise. For a long time in the twin flame dynamic, the divine feminine often carried the emotional weight. She initiated conversations. She explained her feelings. She tried to hold space for his growth. She analyzed the connection. She questioned. She processed. She waited. And sometimes she overextended, because she believed if she loved harder, understood deeper, or stayed longer, he would awaken sooner. But awakening cannot be forced, and guilt cannot be triggered externally. It must arise internally. The moment the divine feminine stops trying to orchestrate his growth is often the moment his growth accelerates. Why? Because chasing disrupts polarity, rescuing delays accountability, over-explaining interferes with self-reflection. When she detaches not from love but from control, she creates space. And in that space, he must face himself. This is not manipulation. It is energetic alignment. If you are the divine feminine watching this, you may feel conflicted. Part of you may want to help him through his guilt, to reassure him, to soften his shame, to say, "It's okay. I understand." But ask yourself, did anyone walk you through your dark night? Did anyone rescue you when you felt abandoned? Did anyone process your pain for you? No. You had to rise. You had to integrate. You had to surrender. He must do the same. The twin flame journey is not about saving each other. It is about evolving separately until you can meet equally. There is a misconception that when the divine masculine awakens, the divine feminine must immediately respond. But response without discernment creates imbalance again. If he reaches out from guilt alone, not integration, you will feel it. Guilt energy feels unstable, feels apologetic but fragile, seeks reassurance. Integrated growth feels grounded, feels steady. It feels accountable without pressure. Your job is not to measure his remorse. Your job is to stay aligned with your own evolution. Because here is the deeper truth. When you healed, when you detached, when you surrendered expectation, you shifted the entire dynamic. You stopped chasing. You stopped over-functioning. You stopped over-explaining. And in doing so, you reclaimed your power. The divine feminine is not meant to shrink to accommodate his awakening. She is meant to stand in her own wholeness. Have you noticed how different it feels when you love someone but no longer need them to validate you? That is sovereignty. And sovereignty changes everything. When he feels guilt, it may trigger compassion in you. But compassion does not require sacrifice. It does not require self-abandonment. It does not require reopening wounds prematurely. It requires boundaries. Healthy, grounded, loving boundaries. The divine feminine must ask herself, if he returns, am I responding from love or from unresolved longing? Because longing can disguise itself as forgiveness. But forgiveness without accountability invites repetition. You are not here to repeat cycles. You are here to break them. His guilt is sacred, but it is his to carry. His transformation is beautiful, but it is his to complete. You are not responsible for guiding him through it. Energetically, when you stop trying to manage his journey, you accelerate your own. You begin focusing on your purpose, your emotional balance, your friendships, your spiritual growth, your nervous system regulation. And something interesting happens. The more stable you become internally, the more he feels the shift. Not because you're sending energy intentionally, but because alignment radiates. When you no longer operate from wounded pursuit, you emit grounded presence. And grounded presence activates growth in the mirror. But here is the critical part. Do not return to chasing just because he feels guilty. Do not overextend just because he apologizes. Do not collapse your boundaries because he seems vulnerable. Vulnerability must be consistent to be trustworthy. Ask yourself, is he stable? Is he accountable without defensiveness? Is he consistent? Is he integrating growth and action, not just words? These are not interrogations. They are discernments. Because divine union is not built on emotional intensity alone. It is built on emotional safety. And safety requires maturity. The divine feminine's role now is not to pull him forward. It is to remain centered. Centered in her own growth. Centered in her own boundaries. Centered in her own sovereignty. If he truly transforms, he will meet you at your level. not ask you to descend to his. Have you ever noticed that when you stop trying to convince someone of your worth, they begin recognizing it? That is energetic law. Detachment is not indifference. It is trust. Trust that what is meant for you will meet you in alignment. Trust that growth cannot be rushed. Trust that divine timing does not respond to pressure. The divine feminine must release the urge to monitor his awakening. Release the need to interpret every movement. Release the temptation to decode every sign. Your peace is priority. And here is something profound. When he feels guilt, he may want reassurance. But reassurance without responsibility stunts growth. Allow him to sit in the weight of his own awareness. That weight refines him. It humbles him. It reshapes him. If you intervene too soon, you interrupt his evolution. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back. Not from bitterness. Not from pride. But from wisdom. You have already done your work. You have already faced your wounds. You have already survived the dark night. Now it is his turn. And whether reunion happens or not, you must remain aligned with yourself. Because the ultimate union in this journey is internal. When you are whole within, you do not fear outcomes. You do not chase clarity. You do not beg for consistency. You observe. You discern. You choose. And that is power. We began this journey with a question. What happens when the divine masculine finally sees the truth and realizes he was the one who ran from love? Now we have walked through it. The illusion, the awakening trigger, the weight of regret, the dark night, the sacred nature of guilt, the fear of facing her again, the transformation path, the sovereignty of the divine feminine. And here we are. At the deeper understanding, guilt was never the end of the story. It was the doorway. When the divine masculine feels overwhelmed by guilt, it is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of awakening. Because awakening is not soft. It dismantles ego. It strips identity. It removes every excuse he once clung to. He thought walking away was strength. Now he understands strength is accountability. He thought emotional distance was clarity. Now he understands clarity comes from integration. He thought independence meant not needing anyone. Now he understands true independence allows interdependence without fear. This is not about romantic drama. It is about evolution. The twin flame journey was never designed to be comfortable. It was designed to refine. Refine pride into humility. Refine avoidance into presence. Refine fear into courage. And guilt is the fire that begins that refinement. Let's pause here and ask something powerful. Would he have grown if everything stayed easy? Would he have evolved if she kept chasing? Would he have confronted his patterns if the illusion remained intact? Probably not. Sometimes loss is the catalyst for clarity. Sometimes silence is louder than confrontation. Sometimes regret awakens what comfort never could. The divine masculine's guilt is sacred because it signals something irreversible. He sees himself clearly now. And self-awareness changes everything. But here is the deeper truth. Guilt alone does not create union. Growth does. He must move from remorse to embodiment. From apology to action. From reflection to regulation. Divine love is not sustained by emotional intensity alone. It is sustained by maturity. And maturity requires integration. The divine masculine is no longer the version of himself who ran blindly. He has faced his shadow. He has felt the weight of regret. He has confronted the illusion. Now he stands at a new threshold. Will he become the man capable of holding divine love? Or will he retreat into comfort again? The answer depends on courage. Courage to remain open. Courage to remain accountable. Courage to show up consistently, not just emotionally but practically. Because divine union is not built in grand gestures. It is built in daily presence, consistency, emotional safety, integrity. And here is something profound. If he truly integrates this journey, he will not approach love the same way again. He will not dismiss vulnerability. He will not label depth as chaos. He will not confuse avoidance with strength. He will understand that love is not meant to be controlled. It is meant to be met. The divine feminine, on the other side, has also evolved. She is no longer operating from wounded pursuit. She is no longer trying to fix or rescue. She stands grounded in her own sovereignty. And that sovereignty changes the dynamic. Because divine union cannot exist between imbalance. It exists when two whole individuals meet, not to complete each other, but to align. If reunion happens, it will not be because guilt forced it. It will be because growth stabilized it. If reunion does not happen, the evolution was still sacred, because both souls rose. And that is the ultimate purpose. Have you noticed that sometimes the greatest transformations in life come from the moments that hurt the most? Regret feels heavy because it dismantles illusion, but illusion must collapse for truth to enter. The divine masculine is not broken. He is becoming emotionally literate, becoming accountable, becoming integrated, becoming capable. Guilt was not punishment. It was initiation. Initiation into a higher level of love. Love that is conscious. Love that is balanced. Love that is chosen, not avoided. And here is the final message for you. Whether you resonate as divine masculine or divine feminine, this journey is not about blame. It is about awakening. It is not about who ran or who chased. It is about who grew. If you are the divine masculine in this dynamic, hear this clearly. Your guilt does not define you. Your growth does. Do not drown in regret. Let it refine you. Let it humble you. Let it teach you. But do not let it paralyze you. Become the man who no longer runs. Become the man who communicates. Become the man who chooses courage over comfort. And if you are the divine feminine, hear this clearly. His awakening is not your burden. Your responsibility is your alignment. Stay sovereign. Stay grounded. Stay whole. Allow him to rise without interfering. Allow divine timing to unfold without forcing. Because what is meant for you will meet you in maturity. This is the higher understanding of the twin flame journey. It is not about romantic fantasy. It is about soul evolution. From illusion to awareness. From awareness to guilt. From guilt to humility. From humility to transformation. From transformation to divine love. And divine love does not operate through ego. It operates through presence. So if this message resonates with you, I invite you to reflect. Where are you in this journey? Are you still holding on to illusion? Are you in the awakening trigger? Are you sitting in regret? Are you integrating growth? Be honest with yourself. Because the moment you become honest, transformation begins. If you found clarity in this message, comment below. I choose growth over ego. Share your experience where you are in your journey. And if you are ready to continue exploring the deeper layers of the twin flame path, awakening, polarity, shadow work, and sacred union, subscribe and stay connected. This journey is not about perfection. It is about becoming. And becoming is sacred. Stay aligned.